Hi everyone, I'm Eddie Copeland from the London Office of Technology and Innovation, and in this video I want to talk about 8 things that senior leaders can do to help their organisations use data effectively. Now I'm conscious that as soon as I say the word data, people's eyes tend to glaze over. People think that this is something very technical, something very niche, and a key message I want to make up front is that that could not be further from the truth. And it's for this reason that at a really fundamental level, your staff's ability to be effective is dependent on the quality of information available to them. And this is true of people working in any sector at whatever level. If you think about it, the receptionist is only going to be effective at their job if they've got great contact information to refer visitors or callers to the appropriate person in your organization. If you're a service manager, trying to determine where you're targeting your resources based on a sort of constrained budget environment, you can do that, but only if you've got data on the nature of the demand for your service. And if you're a senior leader trying to make big strategic decisions about what your local authority is going to do and do next, you can only do that if you've got good information on which to base those decisions. So, absolutely at the core of any organization's ability to be effective is the ability to use data well. What I want to do now is to talk through 8 practical things that I think you can do as senior leadership teams to make sure that your local authority is using data to your full potential. Well, step number 1 is to help ensure that all staff understand the role of data, its limitations, and what else is required for it to have impact. Now, it's worth saying up front that data is incredibly effective at a certain number of things, but it's not the appropriate tool or method for everything. So, what you need is a litmus test for figuring out for any given challenge you're working on, is data the appropriate approach to address it? To that end, LOTI has created this simple 6-step methodology, which we've covered in detail in another video, and I'll include the link in the description below, which frames the role of data in terms of real world outcomes, things that all of you will care about as senior leaders, the real changes you want to see for your residents, and has as a litmus test asking the question, who could do what differently if they had access to better information? And after several years of experience, we've realized that framing the problem in these terms enables organizations to have far more targeted conversations about what data they need and what else needs to be present for it to have a fighting chance of making a difference for you. Right from the chief exec down to the most junior staff, having some sense of thinking about data in these terms is really, really helpful for using data well. Step number 2, ensure that you can quickly connect data held by different teams. One of the lessons I think we saw from the COVID pandemic, if you recall back in those early lockdowns, all local authorities were urgently trying to figure out which households were vulnerable so that they could get to them the support that they most needed. Now, councils who had already invested in the capability to pull data together from multiple different systems so that they could spot common factors associated with one household were able to intervene really, really rapidly and support those vulnerable people. Local authorities that had to do that in a manual, very time consuming way found it took much longer to figure out which households were most vulnerable. And I think the lesson from this is that whatever crisis or problem hits us next, that essential capability to be able to go, what do we know about a household, a person, a business, a place, is something that all local authorities should have. If you haven't yet invested in this capability to join up your internal data, make sure you prioritize that now. Point number 3, give your data teams a remit to work on service reform, not just KPI reporting. After many years of working in and around the sector, it is very clear that within local government, there's a lot of quite frustrated data analysts who could be delivering so much more value for your organizations if only they were given the chance to work in multidisciplinary teams, working alongside policy colleagues, service colleagues, to bring their talents to bear on the most important issues affecting your council and your residents. And you'll find that, of course, dashboards are important. Of course, there's some statutory reporting you've got to do. But can you start to shift the balance so your data teams are focused on those big, thorny problems and really helping colleagues get the most out of data. They will find it more stimulating. You will keep them for longer. You will develop their skills, and you will get much, much more value from your own data staff. Give them a chance to show you what they can do. Point number 4 is about role modeling the change you want to see in your organizations. And I think you need to demand good data for your own decisions. Again, I think we saw elements of this during the COVID experience. I saw many chief execs and senior leadership teams having a bit of a crisis, saying, how am I meant to make big decisions about supporting the vulnerable or supporting the recovery of high streets if all I've got is last year's economic statistics or school admission statistics or data that's just months out of date? And they were demanding much more real-time, much more granular data, and their organization stepped up and responded. And we saw a much greater use of real-time, rich, granular data from lots of different sources, enabling them to make more effective decisions. We shouldn't restrict that just to crisis situations. There's much more we can do, but you are only going to see that organization in your that sort of change in your organizations if you start demanding it and expect it of your staff. So set that expectation. Step number 5, it's very, very clear that for local government to make full use of data, we have to do it. We absolutely depend on citizen trust. We've got to do it with their support. Your information governance teams will, of course, advise you on the legality of sharing data, but it's not enough just to be legal in your use of data. You've got to do things in a way that citizens can support and have faith in and have confidence in. Now, to think about the ethics of data, and this is quite a new and emerging field, helpfully there's a number of frameworks that can make it a much more tangible conversation, one of which you'll see here is the Open Data Institute's Data Ethics Canvas. Other organisations like the Government Digital Service and the UK Statistics Authority have their own frameworks, which others find very useful, but these can guide you through what questions you need to ask in order to think about the ethical implications of using data in certain ways. 2 other examples just to bring to your attention if you're not yet aware. Camden Council has been co-creating a data charter with residents so that residents have a say in how they feel about what the council should and should not be doing with their data. I think that's going to be a really interesting model to watch. Brent Council, meanwhile, has been creating an internal data ethics governance group with some external expertise to ensure there's a really established process for any new data project to be assessed for its ethical implications before it gets put into action. LOTI is publishing lots of resources on both those models for others to learn from. Step number 6. I've mentioned here, standardize your approach to information governance with your key partners. Now, again, this sounds dry and technical, but let me frame it like this. It is not enough for individual organizations just to be good with their own data. This is particularly true of local government. The issues, the problems, the opportunities that affect your residents are not neatly confined to your local authority boundaries. You cannot possibly serve them well if you are blind to how those issues, problems, opportunities transcend your boundaries. You need to have visibility and therefore the ability to share data with your neighbors. And if we think on a more innovation front, if we're looking at new service models, if we're looking at targeting resources effectively, if we're looking at clever things like prediction and prevention or prediction and early intervention, you can do all those things, but only if you have access to data from other organizations. Now, one of the single things that will slow you down the most from being able to use data in those ways is if every organization has a completely different process and set of tools for assessing the information governance aspects of sharing data. This was true in London, and at LOTI we've been doing a lot of work with the information governance community to standardize the process, to put in place some common tools, and these can radically speed up the pace with which we can use data, collaborate with data to serve residents well. So start that conversation if you haven't already with your partners. If you're in London, come and look at the LOTI tools and approach for this, and we can help you implement it. Step 7, again on this data collaboration front, data collaboration can be hard. It requires some resource to do well and to coordinate and make sure it happens effectively. Happily, we have seen that there's been a number of offices of data analytics that are set up to help pan region, pan city, or sort of inter public sector organization data sharing take place much more easily. This map comes from a Nesta report. And in fact, Nesta has published a detailed report on how to set up and use an Office of Data Analytics to enable effective data sharing. If there's one in your area, start engaging with it effectively. In London, effectively, LOTI is the London Office for Data Analytics as well, alongside our GLA partners. But if you've got one in your region, engage with it, make the most of it. If not, consider setting one up. Lastly, point 8 is simply to say, get cracking, try some stuff, start small, don't be afraid to give it a go. You don't have to start with the world's biggest, most ambitious plan. Starting small, building your confidence, learning what works, what doesn't, is the best way to win over hearts and minds. And it will also teach you what you need to focus on in your organization or as a collection of partners in order to use data more effectively. If you do start small and try stuff, please share the lessons with the rest of the community so we can learn alongside you. Final thing to say is that LOTI is here to help. For all of our members in London, we are doing a lot of work at the moment on training for data skills, on how to recruit for data roles, given it's quite difficult to recruit in a place like London where we can't compete on salary with the private sector. We're doing a lot on capacity building to make sure that our members have those skills available to them, and developing communities of practice. So data professionals in different boroughs are sharing their skills and learning from each other. You'll find all the details on our website. Follow us on Twitter, and please get in touch if we can help you as senior leaders implement any of these measures in your organizations. For now, thank you for listening.